Hi guys, it's Emily.
And Donnie. Hello, David.
And we are so excited that you guys could join us tonight for our Go Live Financial Fitness webinar. And so we are asking, has the thought of your debt ever made you feel sick to your stomach, right? And I think we can all relate to that, where we've all been in a point where either we open up a bill or we look at the interest on our mortgage or our car payment and it makes you feel sick to your gut, right? And so I kind of want to start off with saying, like, why does money make us feel the way we do? And like, how did we get to like that point, right? Because with money, as we all know, like, yeah, it's simple. Like, we know money comes in, money comes out, but spending and managing money is really not easy. And so welcome. And so the thing is money is something that's really emotional. It's not just math, right? Because you can be really good at math, but really bad with money. And because there is that emotional link to it, right?
I always like Dave Ramsey. He says it's 90% like emotional behavior and 10% knowledge.
And it's true. But you know, when you're in it, when we started our debt, like, it really did make us feel sick, right? Where we got to the point where we felt sick to our stomach over the debt we had accumulated and how we even got there to begin with. And so I wanted to talk about, again, a little bit more about money and that emotional side effect, and how I think when it comes to money, money can bring a lot of shame and a lot of guilt to a lot of people when you look at your finances. And I think there's these misconceptions that, for instance, money makes you greedy, or that money is evil, and we have this mindset that there's never going to be enough, or that people who have money are just genuinely evil people, or that I can't save enough, or for instance, like, I feel guilt over not giving enough. And so those emotions are really a mindset of what we have with money. And I think it stems back from either, you know, a childhood or a bad experience with money. And I think we wanted to share a little bit about our backstory and who we are and kind of how we tick with how, like, our childhood influenced how we spent money and how we got into our debt problem in the first place. So you want to go first, Tony?
Yeah. So for me, as far as money in my childhood, like, I've always been someone who's kind of debt adverse just because of my upbringing. Like, I remember going to the grocery store as a little kid and having to pay with food stamps because my parents, they would, you know, be on and off of work. So the way we viewed credit in my house, like, if my mom got approved for a credit card, it was a shopping spree. Like, it was amazing that she got approved, and we would go max out the entire thing immediately. And I can remember times whenever we'd have to hide from, I don't know if any of you have been to like Rent-A-Center or any of those areas where you'll rent like tables and couches. So everything in our household was rented from Rent-A-Center, and, you know, they would come and knock on the door to try to repossess things. Hello. And we'd have to hide from them. So just being, you know, that young, paying with food stamps, being ashamed of it and just kind of judged, even as, I don't know how old I was probably like 10 years old, just having that feeling of being judged for, you know, where you're at financially in life, and it's no fault of your own. And so even as an adult, I still kind of carry that with me, and I mean, it affects you forever.
And so, and like, for me, my childhood was a little bit different. So we had moved to DeSoto, which is actually where we grew up, and my parents, my mom quit her job as a banker, and she decided she wanted to stay home with the kids, and my dad was going to be the sole income provider, which they were really excited because they had just, like, they were building this house. And so what ended up happening was my dad ended up getting laid off, right? So mom wasn't working. She had just had my baby brother, and I remember that we were living in the basement with, like, taking baths out of, like, buckets. And I'm sure it wasn't even legal, but we were taking baths out of buckets. And I remember that, like, we were on assistance as well. Like, we didn't have any money at the time. And, like, Christmas came around, and I remember my mom just, like, crying over finances and, like, feeling super stressed. Like, Dad went out and cut, like, a tree in the backyard for a Christmas tree, and, like, Mom felt like she didn't have anything to give us. And so, and that still affects my mom to this day. Like, she considers herself, like, what do you call it, a Scrooge, because she felt like she never had enough to give. And, you know, that was really hard growing up because, like, in those Christmases, she taught herself how to sew so she could make us teddy bears, or she went to the secondhand store to buy us clothes or blankets so that we could have something to give. And so for me, in my upbringing, like, there was never enough money to go around, and I felt like we were really frugal with what we had. Like, we had to make what we had. Like, we hoarded money, I guess, in a way. And so I, like, am inherently a saver at heart because, like, I always felt like there's never going to be enough. And so, which ideally it was a good thing that my parents instilled, like, independence in me, but, like, at a young age I had to be really mature with money. So at, like, 16, like, if I wanted my cell phone, like, I had to pay for my cell phone bill, my gas bill, my, like, everything I ever wanted. And so we knew that we wanted to go to college and get an education. But the thing is neither of our parents could help pay for any of it, which is fine because I know so many people who don't. And I think right now, like, looking back, it was kind of a blessing because it made us work harder for what we wanted in life. So, you know, we have that background where, like, Donnie is inherently definitely a spender.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm definitely more of the saver, I think.
And it comes from our upbringing.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, as soon as we get a credit card, that sucker would be maxed out.
And so we met really young. We were 16 when we met, and we dated for almost 6 years by the time we got married. We had just graduated college, and we were 22. I don't even think I was 22 yet when we got married.
Nope.
So we were really, really young, which I don't regret at all, but we made some stupid mistakes. Not only did we have our loan debt, we also decided to get a car loan, using part of a student loan, and pay for our honeymoon with also another part of a student loan. So we had made a lot of really silly mistakes because, like I said in the beginning, like, we know that money is simple, right? But it's not easy because there's that emotional tie of, like, well, I need this, or I've got to have this, or there's this emotional tie with money. And so...
And then just getting that instant gratification. Like, because we used a credit card to go on our honeymoon, and I had no problem swiping it. Like, I felt like I had unlimited amount of funds. And
we were tipping like a crazy person.
Yeah, it was. And we were enjoying ourselves, so it's hard, like, emotionally, like, when you swipe it, you're like, I can pay it later. But then you have kind of like that hangover after you went all out partying the night before, and you're like, wow, I never want to do that again. But then a couple weeks later, you're out doing it again.
And so, I think we all come to a turning point of where that debt ends up makes you feeling sick, kind of like we started with. And so for us, Donnie had joined the military prior to us getting married, and we had accumulated a lot of debt. Like, we decided to put a European vacation on also a credit card because that was an emergency, because Donnie was getting deployed and he wanted to go to Europe, and I'm like, well, let's do it. So we had accumulated a lot of debt, and when we would look at the interest payment, just the interest, not just the balance, the interest payment to all of our debt was bigger than our rent.
And that's, we didn't have a mortgage, obviously, so that's just consumer debt, and along with our student loans.
And so whenever he got deployed, that was a big turning point for us. And I think, like I said, we all get to a turning point within our financial debt journey where it's like, I've got to make a change, and we just didn't know how. But when it came to the deployment, I think for you were the one where we're like, we've got to do something, because I think that feeling of embarrassment and, like, those childhood emotions we had talked about were, like, definitely coming to a head.
And for me, the turning point was really, like, I was getting ready to go on the deployment, and I remember somebody saying, like, man, wouldn't it be awesome, because we've heard of other units getting canceled, their deployments. They're like, wouldn't it be awesome if our unit got canceled? And Emily and I had already gone on a huge spending spree. We bought a new car. Like I said, we went to Europe. We were also living on our credit card because I wasn't working the last month and a half because we're like, let's spend as much time as we can together. And so at that point, I'm like, no, that'd be terrible if the deployment gets canceled because I'm going to have all this debt that I cannot manage without, that deployment money.
And so that was really an awful feeling because I wanted him home. Mm-hmm. But if he didn't go, we were going to be screwed, like, with our money. Right. And so it was just, like, in a place where it was like, man, that really sucks because we don't really have any options at this point. Or even if it did get canceled, like, we were screwed with our money. And if he goes, I feel screwed because I'm home alone. But, and so I think for us that was our biggest, like, aha moment. And so, like, I think for us, like, we had definitely put on the blinders to what we were doing with our money. Like, making those emotional purchases versus being, like, really focused on what we want because we didn't have a vision of what we really wanted and that we were young, but I think that happens at any age where, life happens fast. Holy cow, like, you blink and, like, life is half over. But and then you're like, how did I get to this position and how do I get out of it? And I think that for us was something, luckily we had gotten early on in our marriage because I think if we had continued at the rate we were going, we were definitely going to be in trouble. Mm-hmm. And I think that was kind of eye-opening to us.
Yeah. And especially the vision, having like a particular goal in place. That's why the deployment helped because we knew we wanted to pay off as much debt as we could at that point. So having that as our goal allowed us to have, pinpoint focus on just eliminating the debt. So nothing else mattered at that point.
And so, and I know it sounds simple, but again, not easy because
right.
like we had to figure out like what our why was. Like why do you want to get out of debt? Like if we don't stop what we're doing now, what is our future going to look like? And is that what we want our future to look like? Mm-hmm. And because we were looking at it and we were like, this is not pretty. This is like, again, we felt like, how did we get here? We felt embarrassed. Like, hey, we're just some stupid kids with a lot of freaking debt. And I think that was like where it made us feel sick to our stomach to the point where we had to find a change. And like, yeah, we weren't having kids yet, but I think our huge why was that emotion tied to it. So like, you can't just be like, yeah, I want to get out of debt, because who doesn't want to get out of debt, right? Mm-hmm. Like the why was like, this makes me feel sick because like we're fighting over money, or we are, ruining credit because we can barely make the payments. And so that why was like, okay, we have to put on the brakes and we have to figure out how this is, because like my parents, like they're kind of conspiracy theorists. I don't know if you consider that, but they don't really trust the banks. So they have like a safe or whatever because they're weird. But like they don't invest in like the stock market. So like financially, like again, the money hoarding, and then like coming from like Donnie's background where there was not enough money to go around. They had credit, but then they couldn't make the payments. And so we had no financial background, like none. Like they didn't teach us this in school, right guys? Like this is something that like we had to do our research with. And Donnie was the first one to be like, hey, we have to do something. And so I'm going to let him talk about the research part, because he was the one that was like, hey, we need to do something. I'm like, yes, we do, because I had the blinders on and I was like, I don't really know what's going on. Mm-hmm. And so kind of, I guess you can share kind of where you started with the research, because we didn't really know where to even begin.
I mean, for me, it definitely started with Dave Ramsey and kind of how I got introduced to Dave Ramsey. I remember, so I sold cars one summer at J. Wolf Nissan, and that was before I joined the Army. That was an interesting experience. But I was driving to work, and in Kansas City there was a billboard that said, act your wage, which I thought was awesome, because here I was selling cars to people that, they were buying, say, $40,000 cars, and they were only making $25,000 a year. And I'm just thinking, like, that doesn't make any sense, like, financially. Why would you do that, where you're literally going to have to work 2 years just to pay your car off? And that's assuming you don't make any other, no extra cash. So that's kind of where I got introduced to Dave Ramsey. And then I just kept doing YouTube videos. There wasn't anything in particular, But what I came up with is kind of a list of 6 things that I saw that were really important, and I was kind of wanting you guys to write these down. So the 6 things are: number 1 is to stop hiding, and I'm going to go into each one of these in detail. Number 2 is creating a budget. Number 3 is cutting your expenses. Number 4 is side income. Number 5 is don't finance a car. And number 6 is a credit card. Like, don't have a credit card. So first, back to number 1, stop hiding. Before I went on the deployment, like, we didn't really know exactly where we were financially. We didn't know how much debt we had, and we didn't really know how much we were spending every month. So
I think for us, like, we were definitely hiding from it. Like, we didn't even know, like, I graduated from nursing school, like, and I had signed those loan documents, but I really had no idea how much, like, student loan debt I had.
And where it was.
Right, or what loan it was through. I know that sounds naive, but, like, I saw the payment and I just paid it. Like, or, but I didn't know what my total was. I was completely oblivious to it, to be honest.
Yeah, so we went ahead and used Dave Ramsey's approach, where you literally just list out from smallest to largest all your debts.
So we included, like, so we had, like, for instance,
we had student loan debt, we had credit card debt, we had braces.
Yeah,
debt.
We had the cars. We had, like, a J.C. Penney, or no, it was a Kohl's card.
A Kohl's card.
So, you know, like, so we started off, like, looking, like, at all of our bills, which I'm trying to remember, how did we even find, like, those out? So I guess we just went down and, like, found our statements and started writing down, like, largest or smallest to largest.
Yeah, and then for student loans, there's actually a database that I found that you can go to that'll show you all your federal student loans. And I can put that in the links below as far as what that website is. And then, so that's number 1. Stop hiding, figure out where you're at, because you need to know where you are in order to get where you want to go. So the number 2 was creating a budget. So
and why?
Yeah, and as far as why, I mean,
well, I meant, like, you know, like, for a budget, like, for me, I'm like, well, I make good money, like, I know I have money in the account, so I can just spend what I want, right?
Right.
But, like, the why is because I would spend the money and then look back to see where it went.
Yeah, and that's how the budgets were. That's how I used to make them, as far as, like, okay, this is how much we spent next month, so we can afford a car payment because we paid this, you know, last month, so our month going forward should be the same. But in reality, and Emily and I did this whenever we were paying off the house, we sat down each month, because it has to be a two-way discussion as far as where the money is going to be going. So we wrote out all of our expenses and everything that we thought was going to be coming up for that month, because you need to tell your money where you want it to go in order for it to line up with your vision and your overall goal.
Because I was just, like, looking where it went, and then, like, I think it was really important for us to know, like, to tell it where to go, because those things that were important to us and, like, non-negotiable at that point. So, for instance, like, we started off with the car. I think it was my car had the least amount on the loan, and we were like, we're gonna pay this amount, this is non-negotiable, this is what we have left over, and so we just started allocating where that would go.
Yeah,
so that would
it's
be the
kind of
example.
like the concept of pay yourself first. I remember hearing this as a kid and, like, well, that's stupid. Pay yourself first, what if you have no money left over? But the concept is, you know, with us having a set dollar amount that we wanted to pay each month towards our debt, like, that's the number we start with, and then everything else we work around. So as far as your food budget, your out to eat budget,
miscellaneous budget. I mean, like, we definitely gave ourselves a miscellaneous, because there was always stuff that would maybe come up that wasn't necessarily coming out of the emergency budget, but was something that was like, oh, we didn't anticipate that for, or like for birthdays, like, okay, we know this month we have a birthday coming up, so this is how much we can spend on the gift, and that's it. Like, that's our max.
And another issue, like, it takes about 3 months before you set up a budget that's actually doable. Because at first, I know Emily and I both, like, we wanted to be like, okay, well, then we just won't go out to eat this month so we can put more towards the debt.
That's just not realistic.
You need to make it as realistic as possible, so you're not, like, depriving yourself. You obviously want to, like, put some fire underneath your butt in order to do it, but you don't want to make it so tight like we did, where you just blow it, and then once you blow it, it's like, next month we can
We'll
figure
start
it out.
next month.
Yeah, so make it manageable and actual, livable.
And the thing was, like we started in a little black notebook with our budget. Then we kind of progressed into like an Excel document. And so I know there's a lot of really cool tracking now, because one of the questions we got earlier in the week was like, how do I track all the receipts and all the like expenses, right? Like, how do we track that? And so, yeah, we started on paper and like had receipts galore, and we could have scanned them, or we had the Excel documents. But Donnie actually did the research and found
everydollar.com. So it's Dave Ramsey's budgeting app. It's free, and you just plug in everything that you spend throughout the week. And so at the beginning of the month, you go ahead and set up your budget, and then you just plug in things as you go, which I find it very helpful and useful. There's a ton of other apps out there, and there's other ways to do it. So you want to find the one that works best for you. But this one has worked the best for me, and this is what Emily and I have been using for the last almost 2 years.
And so, it is definitely an easy tracking technique. So it's free, but you have to, so like you put in like how much money is coming in, and then you allocate like exact dollar amounts to, say utilities, mortgage payments. So basically the mandatory things that have to get paid. And then there's of course like the miscellaneous like expenditures, like going out to eat and that sort of thing. And the thing is you have to manually put it in, but again, it's free. I think there's like a $10
if you want it connected to your bank account.
But then you still have to allocate where it goes. So I don't find that
the free
helpful, especially when you're trying to save money. But it's definitely, so it's everydollar.com, because you're allocating where every dollar should go, which, which is nice.
And I'll put that down below. So then next, number 3 is cut expenses. So once we had our budget in place, we wanted to look for ways to save money on things that, didn't align with our goals and our ultimate vision. So here I'm just talking about like whenever we were paying off our mortgage. So I think at the time, I remember doing the first couple months, and we were spending $700 a month in groceries for 2 people, which I thought was ridiculous. So,
but we weren't going to Aldi's consistently.
Right, we were just going to Target. We shopped at Target and Whole Foods, so that was our issue.
And anyone who goes to Target knows when you walk into Target, you don't walk out with just groceries.
Right. But I mean, that was just our food budget. So just finding ways to save and cut expenses, like switching from Target to Aldi's. Another way that we've saved a lot of money, I mean, we've never had it to begin with, but I know some people that have cable. Like, we only use Netflix, and that's another great way to save money, or Hulu, any of those
Amazon
online.
Prime, where you're already using like for shipping or something like that, where you can have TV and not have to pay for the cable. Because I'm trying to remember, what was your sister spending on cable?
It's like $120 a month.
Yeah, that's insane. Like, so that's like over $1,200 a year, which is definitely where you can not even know where it's going.
Yeah. So the nice thing is, once you have the budget, you know what expenses are going out, and you just try to find ways to save. So you see you have auto insurance, well, maybe you can try to find a way to switch to a different company to save a little money there. So there's definitely a ton of different ways you can cut your expenses that way.
And so, the thing was in the budget too, or cutting the expenses, like, yes, we still had splurges. And I think one really good tip that we kind of received is like, for instance, like a pair of shoes, or I wanted to splurge on, I don't know, like something that I know was not really like from the miscellaneous fund. It wasn't an emergency, but I wanted
and something you don't buy often.
Right. So
like clothes. So we would create a little separate savings account, and each month we would put, I don't remember how much, but like $50 or so into this separate savings account, and that's kind of like our splurge fund.
But I felt like when we're cutting expenses, it doesn't mean that you have to cut out the fund. But what you want to do on a splurge, what I thought was a really helpful tip, was like, say I'm wanting to spend this like $40 on a pair of shoes or something. Like, am I going to be able to match that $40 that I'm splurging and put it into like the savings portion, right? And if I can't meet it, then I probably should not get it this month. Until I can either save up, which is really hard to do because sometimes we are all impulse or emotional buyers, and that's just how we are by nature. But I thought that was definitely a good tip there. So the cutting expenses for us, definitely Aldi's was a huge saving expense, like on our groceries, because I know we were spending a lot of money there. We also didn't realize how much, like, say, going to Starbucks. Donnie loves coffee.
That's more my issue.
How much that can add up, or going out to dinner. I love going out to dinner. Depends on the restaurant, but
and what's nice with having a separate budget, because Emily, she says she likes going out to eat to restaurants, but she doesn't. So there'd still be money left over at the end of the month, so that was my excuse to actually go out to eat.
Right, but I meant, like, I like going out to dinner, but I hate spending the money going out to dinner. So that's my childhood coming through. But for instance, how we saved on that, because our budget got really small for going out to eat, but of course, like, we wanted to have date night because that was really important to our marriage. And so, like, for instance, like beer or cocktails or wine, like, you're going to be paying a ton of money on drinks. And it was like, holy moly, that's a third of our bill when it came to drinks. So we ended up either not buying drinks altogether, and if we were going to, like, go out with friends and Donnie wanted beer, like, he would either drink a beer at home, or, like, when we, like, went out to the other person's house and I would drive, because I'm like, you are not spending $14 on 2 beers. Like, that is just unreal. That is a tank of gas, back when gas was cheap. But
trust me, there will be arguments with that, but that is...
and then other things, too, is, like, we would sometimes share meals. Not always, but I think that was other areas where we're like, okay, we want to go out to dinner because A, I don't want to either cook tonight, or we want a date night and need some time together, but we only literally have $30 left in the budget. So we need to either share a meal or it's just not going to happen. So so those were my cutting expensive tips that I thought I would wanted to share.
So the next one, number 4, is side income. So obviously cutting expenses only works so far. And I mean, whenever we first started this, we needed to earn money because I wasn't working at the time. So just coming up with some kind of side income to help, cover all those expenses.
Because you were in school full time.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of those could be mow lawns, Uber, which I'm literally going to try Uber. And
my brother's been doing Uber and has been making
$18 an hour doing it.
Yeah, making some extra income so that he can make his new car payment, which he should not have gotten a car.
And then what Emily did was pick up extra shifts at work. Yeah. So that's a great opportunity to earn a little extra income in order to cover any gaps that you might have in your budget. And then the last one is obviously you can start your own business. So whether that be a lawn mowing business, a dog walking business.
Ebooks on Amazon. You can write if you're a writer. There's so many things that you can do online these days to make an extra income at very little, like, investment or cost. So those things definitely help, like, add a little bit more to the income, especially when you're struggling or have, like, a temp job or a seasonal job, because that can be really hard because you're like, well, we only have one income now because my other partner, or I'm a single person, like, I don't have extra income to have a dual income. So I think that is where a lot of people trip up a little bit and say, well, there's just not enough, because I've had that mentality, like we talked about, like in my childhood, I always had this feeling that there was never enough. And so to, like, feel like you're working towards something, so when you're working extra hard to bring in then that side income, you're gonna be, like, super extra focused. I felt like I was, to be like, well, I'm not just gonna blow that now, like, I want to pay this off, because I know in the beginning I was making more, so I'm like, well, I can spend a little more. Well, then we weren't making any traction in our goal, and then I'm like, okay, well, I'm putting all this extra time and work in, and it's going nowhere, and I was really frustrated. So I think that was the motivation for me to definitely get on board with that.
And one thing that I found eye-opening, once we started doing the budget, like, fully every single month, I remember getting, it was a 1.5% raise, but even a $20 raise, you actually feel it at that point because you're tracking your money. You're like, oh, that's 20 extra bucks. Like, before, whenever we'd get raises, you're like, man, I didn't even feel like I got a raise. Like, the money just keeps going out. It doesn't ever accumulate. But once you start a budget, you're going to feel every single raise, and it's awesome.
Because because you have a little extra to allocate somewhere. So, and so then when we, the next tip that we made a mistake with was not financing a car, was something that Dave Ramsey is really big on. And mind you, we got car loans on both of our cars. But looking back...
Now they're paid off, but original.
Yes, they're paid off now. But our cars are not new. Donnie's first car ever, he paid cash for, was $500, and it caught on fire twice.
So we let that one go.
Yeah, we let that Mercury Sable go. But we needed something safe, and like I had a 91 Honda Civic that I drove into the ground. And mind you, we had just gotten married. This little car was really, really quite crappy, and we shared a car for a while, which I don't know.
It's a pain.
I
was in school at the time, so it would be difficult if two people were working.
Yeah.
But it's...
But so we were like, okay, we're going to use that student loan to put the down payment to get a car loan. So that was our big mistake there. And even though we made that mistake, I think Dave Ramsey's concept of not financing a car is really smart if you can. And I know for us, that was just not feasible at the time of where we were at in our lives. But what we were smart with was, like, we are going to not get brand new cars. Like, I think both of our cars were under $12,000, like, for the total loan. And so we wanted our car payment to be, like, no more than $100. And I know that sounds crazy, but we're like, we don't want it more than $100 because we want to pay these suckers off so that we can, like, double the payment or triple the payment, and then put money towards principal, because the interest was, like, mind-boggling. And so we did not get brand new cars. Yes, we got loans. Do we recommend getting loans? No, but if you can pay cash, great. But I know not everybody can do that.
But we hope in time you can. Like, by us believing firmly in this now, it's going to help us whenever we do buy our next car. And
they just depreciate so much.
Yeah, and that was another killer for me, because we bought our cars, like I said, $12,000. The Kelly Blue Book on mine is $1,500 now. So
when you trade it in, you're getting nothing, right? So I think, and then the hailstorms, like people having anxiety over hailstorms, like ruining their cars, and you know, yeah, our cars are not new. We've had to put some money into fixing them, but it definitely, like, I'm gonna run it until it dies again. That's my goal. So.
And also, like, because we just put $1,500 into my car, and it definitely hurt to put that much money into the car. But when I think about it, like, that's only $100 a month, where if I went and got a new car, at the time we had no savings, so we'd have to get an auto loan, and we just didn't want to do that. So
no. And then the last tip, which was number 6, was information on credit cards. So mind you, we did have credit cards.
And we still do have credit cards.
Yes.
But we pay them off every single month.
So our biggest tip, because I know for a lot of people who we've talked to about budgeting, even family members, where, like, they will rack up the credit card debt, and then, like, they get another consolidated loan to pay them off, and then they rack them back up, and then it's just so heartbreaking, because it makes you so frustrated with yourself, because you have, you know, you're trying to do the right thing, and then you just created an even bigger debt problem. And so for us, you know, we use our debit cards for majority of things, but we have our credit cards. So, like, when we went on Hawaii for our baby moon, we put the rental cars on there, we put the you know, airline tickets on there, but we had the money to pay them off, right? They have that secondary insurance with the credit card that debit cards do not hold, so that's why we use that purchase. But at the end of the month, we know that we have that money to pay off at the end, right? And so if you're just getting started, like, or if you don't have a credit card yet and you're really worried about establishing credit, like, credit cards are really one of those things that are tied to emotional spending, in my opinion, because it detaches you from the emotion. Like, I can just swipe this credit card and I don't see that it's coming out of my account, and then when the bill comes later, you're just like, oh my word, like, super stressed about it.
And the other thing, like, for credit cards, because I like getting the cash back. However, I mean, you're playing with fire when that happens, because my credit card's a 1% cash back. So if I wanted to get $100 cash back, I would need to spend $10,000. So, I mean, put that in perspective. I had to spend $10,000 to get $100. If for some reason I missed a payment, they're going to hit me with a $35 fee, and they're going to start charging the interest on everything. So you're playing with fire, and you could get burned. So it's a bad game to play.
It is. And, like I said, majority, like, what is the percentage of people in debt these days? I mean, it's huge. I mean, majority of the United States has debt, right? And so, obviously, we are not, we're spenders inherently. And so at that point, if we know it's an issue where we can't make the payment on time, where the balance is zero, or you feel like you're just mindlessly spending out of habit or emotion, I say it's smart not to have them.
Yeah.
To cut them up.
Yeah.
And I know people worry about their credit, but if you're doing it right, and even if your credit score eventually, you pay off the credit card debt and you reach your goal of being debt-free, which I want for every single one of you. So at this point, we have everything paid off. We are debt-free. It did not happen overnight. It took us over 7.5 years to get there, and we made mistakes along the way. But mind you, like, we will never, hopefully, have to take out a huge credit line ever again.
Besides possibly a mortgage.
And the thing is ideally, I'd love to save up to pay cash for our next house. Because I'm content where I'm at, and so we're just going to be able to save and hopefully do that. But I know, looking back 7 years ago, that wasn't even reality in my mind. And so, and I know there are some people in this call where they're like, I don't have any credit. Like, what am I supposed to do if I want to get a mortgage? Because if you're going to get a mortgage, that would be the one big debt, because obviously who can save up that much money when you're just getting started out, right? So I know one of the questions from Kendra was, should I get a credit card to establish credit? And I would say no, because, if you are debt-free at this point, like, paying off the credit card each month, or having that and getting possibly into that slippery slope, I wouldn't do it. But there are mortgage companies that deal with people who have no credit, right? There's a lot of companies that deal with people who have bad credit, and they will charge you out the wazoo. But there is, Dave Ramsey recommends, it's called Churchill Mortgage, where they specifically work with people who don't have any credit because they are debt-free, right? But they want to get a mortgage or something like that. So
you're not penalized for not having a credit score.
So I would stay away from the credit cards if you can. We have one. I don't like it. Donnie likes to hold on to it. But that's...
I feel like I'm going to cut it out.
I hope we can. But he's kind of attached to it. He's had it since, I think you were a senior in high school, and they send all those lovely credit cards in the mail before we go off to college. So I think you have an emotional attachment to it. But we don't really spend on it. So... and so just the recap. So we had those 6 tips, the stop hiding, the budgeting and why it's so important, telling where your money needs to go, cutting the expenses, like what is really important to you, how and what you can do for a side income, financing the car or being wise with the car. So if you have this huge, car payment that's bigger than your rent, or it's, super big, if you can sell the car and buy something that you have the equity in, where you have no car payment, that would be huge. And then, of course, we talked about the credit card. So we talked about our journey a little bit. What were you saying?
As far as the car, like, even if, let's say, you're upside down on the car by just a couple thousand, it might even be smarter to get a little loan to cover that difference and then downgrade to a smaller car. Because if you're sitting at a $25,000 car payment, but you can buy a $4,000 car and, carry a $2,000 note, having a $6,000 pile of debt is a lot easier to get through than the $25,000 car loan.
It's true. It's less overwhelming, I think. And so, the vision changes over the time. Back 7 years ago, we were just sick to our stomach, and we're like, we are being really stupid with our money, and we're going down a rabbit hole, and we're fighting about money, and we have to go on a deployment that we don't want to go on because we have spent so much. To now, 2 years ago when we bought the house, we knew we wanted to pay. I guess 3 years ago. 3 years ago when we bought the house, we knew we wanted to pay it off quickly. So we bought a house that we knew we could tackle wisely. So when we applied for the mortgage, they were like, "Oh, do you want this huge loan?" And we're like, "No, we only want like a third of it, right?" And they're like, are you sure? I'm like, yeah, pretty sure. Because I didn't want it to be completely overwhelming with the interest, because I would look at the interest payment and be like, that's awful. And so then we started thinking about having a family, and that was the fuel to our fire. Like we found a why and another turning point to pay off this huge amount of debt. Because of that emotion, right? Like I wanted to stay home to be able to stay with our baby, and like I'm like, we're gonna make this happen. And so finding that why, like besides looking at your debt and making you feel sick, like what do you want your life to look like in 5-10 years? I mean, it's so hard to see that far out, because that's kind of what it took us. But to consistently look and see that, and yeah, you're gonna trip up along the way, because I know we did.
Yeah, you're gonna make mistakes, and you can't let that hold you back, because we made a lot just paying off the mortgage, because we had fallen into some debt with our computer along the way. But I mean, that happens.
Yeah, so you're gonna make mistakes, but at the same time, I want you to find a why. Like if I don't change now, what is it gonna look like? And if I can like focus on that why that makes you want to cry, like makes you feel like I'm doing this because XYZ, then at that point, that is going to keep you like eye on the prize. And that's what the really hard part is like, of course we all want to be out of debt, but why do you want to be out of debt? And that was our huge thing. And we got so much like crap being like, people are like, well, if you pay off your mortgage, you're not gonna have credit, or if you pay off your mortgage, then you're not gonna get that tax credit or write-off. And I'm like, if I pay off my mortgage, I can stay at home. I don't have a monthly payment minus my like insurance and like, what do you call it, taxes. And so like, I think it's really interesting, because Donnie like looked at that tax write-off that so many people look at their mortgage and be like, it's a joke. If
you still want the deduction, you can give and you get the same deduction. So you're paying $2,000 to the bank to get that interest deduction, or you could give $2,000 to your church, and that's a much better write-off.
So yeah, so if you're paying so much in interest, you only get a percentage of that back. So it's not like they're giving you 100% back, right? I mean, it just didn't add up for us in the end. So, and then now we're debt-free. We're able to, create and live the life we want, because of this journey, this long journey, but we had that why at the end. And like I said, we made mistakes. It was not overnight, but that strong vision is what really kept us on board. So that was kind of our tips, a little bit of our journey, and our why. But we're going to open it up to questions here and see if any of you guys have questions, anything finance related, or like how we did it, or what we did. I would love to hear them, because Donnie is more the financial guru, so to speak, but we will definitely try to tackle those. So if you want to ask away in the comments, we can answer those for you guys. So we'll give you a few minutes.
What was another question?
I think we already tackled credit cards, and we tackled tracking, like the debit card receipts. Yeah. So, does anyone have any questions? All right, guys. Well, if there's no questions, I would love to have you guys just reach out to us. You can private message us, or you can comment below if you're watching the recording, and we will get back to you. I hope you found this helpful, and that you guys have a good night.
Yeah. Thanks.
Take care, guys.